All right, we're back with part 2 of my review of the C64 Collection 2. Sorry it's a little later than I expected. I got a little busy for perfectly valid reasons, I assure you. If you didn't catch part 1 and you're curious about any of those games, be sure to check it out. This time, we're talking about the back half of the cart alphabetically. We're going to talk about Pitstop 2, Slayer, Street Sports Basketball, Sorta Fargoal, Uridium, World Games, and Zamzara. Pitstop 2 is part adrenaline-pumping racing game and part tedious minigame. 1 or 2 players race around one of 6 tracks or take on the whole grand circuit, but keep an eye on tire wear and fuel supply. If your Go Juice is running low or your Go Donuts are getting chewed up, it's time to make one of the titular Pitstop 2's, pit stops. In the pit, you must tediously micromanage your pit crew to top up your tank and swap out your tires. The tire man lacks depth perception, and it's difficult to get him onto the right tire. Meanwhile, if you let the gas man pump for too long, your tank overfills and you start over from empty. Did the original game have a Three Stooges licensing that had to be removed from the cart? That would explain a lot. Anyway, needless to say, races are won or lost in the pit. This one's great for 2 players because it's a racing game with a California Games type event right in the middle. 2 games for the price of 1. Actually, this makes me wonder why we never got a version of California Games with lower stakes activities like gas pumping. You know, burger flipping, stair walking, getting out of bed after the age of 35 without hurting your back. The possibilities are endless. Slap a score on it and let me compare it with someone else and I'm in for anything. Slayer is a straightforward and unapologetic horizontal shooter, which is to say I'm not very good at it. It's got all the elements you might expect from a game like this: narrow corridors, an endless stream of projectiles headed towards you, and powerful pickups that you lose immediately because, oops, you bumped your head on the ceiling. The gameplay is solid, the sprites and the animation look great, however, they opted for sound over music on this one, which means when you aren't firing, you're listening to the quiet vacuum of space. It's enough to give a Slayer an existential crisis. I definitely don't have anything against Slayer. In fact, I like that it's not trying to overcomplicate things. On a cart filled with so much experimentation and wackiness, there's something to be said about a game that's so straightforward and by the book. I'll be honest, I didn't have high hopes for Street Sports Basketball. Street Sports Baseball on the C64 Collection 1 was tedious and frustrating. However, Street Sports Basketball delivers a pretty alright basketball experience. Shoot baskets, intercept passes, randomly fall on your butt for no reason. Everything you associate with basketball is here. There's just one button to hit and context determines what action it takes: pass, shoot, block. Run into folks to knock them down or steal the ball. It's not brilliant, but it's perfectly fine, which honestly is about all I can say for any basketball game at the best of times. Sword of Fargoal has the funnest name to say on the cart. The original version of the game was written in BASIC, which makes it a distant relative of Gorilla.base, but unlike Gorilla.base, Fargoal has no giant apes engaging in artillery battle in major metropolitan areas. Or at least not the parts of the game that I've seen, anyway. Fargoal is a sorta, kinda turn-based-ish dungeon crawl through randomly generated caverns to recover the titular sword and bring it back to the surface. Along the way, you'll fight monsters, collect treasure, donate all your worldly possessions to the church, and politely wait while everyone else decides where they want to move to. The game's a little slow-moving, but there's a surprising amount of depth to be found within these rough edges. If you can handle the action stopping every 5 seconds or so, you'll find an interesting game that offers a unique take on a genre that at the time was still establishing itself. Uridium is a scrolling shooter that was released on the NES as The Last Starfighter, and that's not a joke. Fly your fancy fish-shaped spaceship back and forth across enemy dreadnoughts, destroying defensive installations and enemy squadrons while avoiding walls and communications towers, which are nearly indistinguishable from the rest of the ship. Once you've taken out enough of the defenses, you'll be offered the opportunity to land on the ship and trigger a self-destruct. Then you'll fly off to the next one, secure in the knowledge that the ship and everyone on it was probably evil, even though you didn't read the manual closely enough to say for sure. There's a real sense of speed to this game, and sometimes it can be tough to figure out what exactly is going on, including which parts of the dreadnoughts are impassable, but it's still a thrilling and unique shooter that fits in perfectly with the rest of the games on this cartridge. World Games is the second multi-event sports game on this cart. While its events are decidedly less radical than California games, it definitely has its own charm. Compete in 8 diverse events like barrel jumping, cliff diving, and ritual animal abuse, bull riding. This is your standard multi-event sports fair. Press the right buttons at the right time to perfectly orchestrate a realistic simulation of your chosen event, and watch the points roll in. The events are a little bit more summer or winter games, and a little less California games when it comes to how engaging I find them, but Yeti-less ski-free and crushing people with a telephone pole is a lot of fun. Like I said before, slap a score on anything and I'll be happy to compete on it. Zamzara looks a lot like a Game Boy game where you play as a xenomorph that has stolen a pulse rifle off a colonial marine and is out for revenge. It also has the very best box art from the collection. Look at that face, how can you be mad at it? This game is really interesting. There aren't a lot of colors here, but the sprites are really detailed and cool. This is probably the game that most benefits from scanlines as far as the sprites go. They look good without scanlines, but they look great with that little bit of extra blending. It plays a lot like Cybernoid, and it's at least as tough. Make your way through 20-something relatively short levels while blasting all the weirdo enemies with a rifle and a selection of special weapons. The cool thing here is, just like with Cybernoid, the special weapons aren't a rarely used get-out-of-jail-free card. You're meant to use them as you go through and sort of solve each encounter as a bit of a puzzle, and you get enough of those special weapons to use them freely if you use them strategically. There is one more game by the name of Gyroscope that you can get by plugging in both the C64 Collection 1 and 2 into your VS, but since it's not technically on the cart, I'm not going to cover it here. Sorry. Overall, this cart has become one of my favorites surprisingly quickly. I'm not sure how much of that is just because it's new and it's what I've been spending time with recently, or if it's because it's been up against a lot of shmup-heavy carts, which I'm not super great at, but right now I feel like Blaze has really knocked it out of the park with this second home computer cart. There's a lot of great variety and really fun and sometimes experimental games from the early days of home computer gaming. If you like the C64 Collection 1, or you otherwise don't panic at having to sometimes open the virtual keyboard or read a manual, I would strongly recommend this cart.